found you. We had to use another platform, but we're tenacious. So
yes, we were trying desperately to just like do this right from Facebook, but it just wasn't happening tonight. So we hope the reception's okay. We're having a little bit of technical issues, but that's okay. Let's get right into it. So we usually don't go live on Wednesday evenings, but we found a time that was going to allow both of us in our schedule to talk to you guys this month, because there's a very important topic that we need to touch on as moms and as women. And being that it is it Infant Loss Month? How do you say it? What's the correct term?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's phrased all different kinds of ways, but October is essentially dedicated for miscarriage, infant loss, and infertility issues. So we're trying to make sure that we honor all of those struggles all together, because they're all a sense of loss.
Yeah. So this evening, we want to honor this topic. And Jenny's actually going to tell us her personal story that she went through with miscarriage, right?
Yeah.
And then also what she was going through and what she wished had happened, right, Jenny?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, for those of you who have known me for a long time, I'm pretty vocal on what my story was and what my trajectory was and my journey to become a mom. I have been pretty outspoken about it from the get-go, because I just noticed immediately that this isn't really something that women discuss or talk about. But the fact of the matter is, the stat is 1 in every 4 women have experienced a miscarriage. Which is pretty significant. Like, if you think about like your girlfriends or like your mom friends that you hang out with, it's probably more than 4. So that's a pretty significant number. You indefinitely know someone who has experienced some form of miscarriage, infant loss, or infertility. Now, that statistic is just for miscarriage for sure, but those different topics touch everybody. And that was my story. I hadn't known anyone really personally that had experienced a miscarriage before I'd had one myself. And I didn't know anyone who had had one their first pregnancy. Mine was my first pregnancy. So I didn't know what to expect. I had never been pregnant before. I didn't know what the signs were. I didn't know that oftentimes before you miscarry, you kind of lose those disgusting pregnancy symptoms that you have, like that feeling of nausea, or all of those things start to slowly disappear. For some, I just didn't know what to expect or what to look for. And so I was almost to my second trimester when I had experienced a miscarriage, or I started to bleed and didn't know if that was something to be concerned about. Luckily, I mean, and Jess and I, we both have a friend who just so happened to have been our OB. We were probably one of the luckiest people to ever exist, because she was wonderful.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah.
Yeah, props to Sarah, Dr. Little. She was the best. And so I was grateful and lucky to have had both a doctor and a friend in my corner. But still in all, I didn't know the physical implications and what to expect on what the healing process would look like, how to process all of the emotions, because people don't know how to respond to miscarriage. There wasn't something tangible, that there wasn't a baby that was born that we could have buried to kind of grieve. The visual process is kind of important, and that didn't really exist during that time. So it almost felt like I almost felt guilty that I was grieving it, which I think is a common feeling for a lot of women. Disclaimer, every woman processes it differently. And there are plenty of women who have had miscarriages that didn't feel the grief or the longing that went along with it. And all of that is normal. I just want to make sure that we're clear that however you responded to it, that was normal. But the first time that I miscarried, I was devastated. I thought there was something wrong with my body. I just thought there was something that I could have done to prevent it. And there are all these ideas, right? Because when you're pregnant, you're given this list, right? All these foods that you should avoid, all these activities that you shouldn't participate in, don't eat tuna, for God's sake, like all these things, right?
If Sarah's your doctor, then you can totally eat sushi.
Yes, again, but depending on, what kind of instruction that you received from your own doctor. There are all these lists of do's and don'ts when you're
Right.
pregnant. And I just second guess myself all the time. Like, did I eat something I shouldn't have? Or was I, did I just not pay attention, or certain things? And then I got pregnant quickly with my eldest daughter right afterward. I guess the term is rainbow baby, right? They call them the rainbow babies.
Yeah.
So I was so lucky to, I felt like this was like the second chance that I had. But I was very ill during the entire pregnancy. I had preeclampsia, and I was constantly paranoid because I hadn't anticipated that you could lose a baby before that.
Right.
Like that wasn't an option that I had considered,
Yeah.
and at that point, that was all that I could think about. So it definitely shaded or framed my pregnancy with my oldest, and then I had two subsequent miscarriages between my oldest daughter and my youngest. They're 5 years apart, not intentionally. But yeah, I mean, and almost all of my miscarriages around the same time. My first one almost toward the end, toward the beginning of the second trimester. The middle one was a little bit earlier on, and the last one around the same time. But that's also something I think that moms need to discuss as far as the miscarriage community is concerned, and that we kind of like caveat it with like, I was just 6 weeks, so like it's not a big deal. Like no one is ever just pregnant.
Yeah.
Like, there's no caveat for you longed for this child. In some cases, you prayed for this child, if that's what you do. You created a room for him and named it, and all of those attachments to it, no matter how far along you were. There's no just as far as grief was concerned. Yeah, but I think that's the overview of my story in becoming a mom. It was hard and it was difficult, and we're also incredibly grateful for those little lives, because without them we wouldn't have two beautiful girls.
Yeah, that's right. Man, and what you said, like it's, just 6 weeks, just a baby. I remember when I got pregnant with Charlie, my first baby, I knew I was pregnant before I knew I was pregnant. Like I knew I was, I was feeling a certain way that I was just like, I've never felt this before. I'm pregnant. Right. And I took a pregnancy test, and I didn't even miss my period yet. And I already knew that I was pregnant. And from the moment that I had confirmation that I was pregnant, I already felt like I had a child. So I know what you were trying, what you were describing, because as a
Yeah.
mom, that's exactly how I felt. And I was there for part of your journey. We actually got pregnant at the same time.
Yeah.
And I'm going to start crying now, because I remember being in the restaurant with Sarah and all of her husbands, and Sarah telling me that you were pregnant and vice versa.
Yeah.
And, we were supposed to have babies together. And I just remember, crying on the phone with you, because, in a way, like I felt like, how could I didn't know what I could possibly say to you or how I could comfort you. I felt like I needed to like almost hide the fact that like I was going to have a baby and you weren't anymore. So yeah, it's like look at us right now. We're going to start crying, because
thank you.
This is a really hard conversation to have, It's
for sure. Yeah.
So
And I remember grieving that, and also remembering that I never wanted to make you feel bad.
And you didn't need to say anything.
I don't want her to ever feel like, but I remember that being really hard for us to navigate. It was really hard, because we celebrated together and then we couldn't celebrate together at the end. And that was really hard, and going to, we even posted about it last week, right? Going to see you in the hospital when you had Charlie, was both wonderful and super sad for me. We should have been there eating shitty turkey sandwiches together. But we weren't.
So
yeah.
what can we say to moms? Like basically we're saying that we should talk about this stuff more. And, it's great that there's a month of awareness so that it reminds us to talk about it. But when we are having that conversation, what kind of conversation should we be having?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an excellent question. And I just want to be clear, during the times that I suffered through all three, I just have the best women friends. Like, you're all amazing. I do. And just because I didn't have someone to like walk through me experiencing the same thing doesn't mean that my friends didn't show up for me. And that looked different. But it was all necessary. Like, they showed up physically to like sit with me and watch like crappy Netflix shows and eat Ben and Jerry's and not say anything. And that was wonderful. They dropped off meals, which was very helpful. They took Ellie out. Siblings is really important, especially when they're old enough. And my daughter was old enough to get attached to these babies and then have to let them go. And I think watching her grieve was harder than me having to grieve. To do that is just terrible. But I mean, I feel like my friends modeled exactly what you should be doing. You should show up, and you don't have to feel like you need to say something specific or you have to be eloquent. Like, I honestly don't remember a single thing anyone said to me, but I remember people showing up. I remember somebody like rubbing my shoulders and not saying anything. I remember people bringing like soup and meals that I just had to heat up and not think about. I remember people taking Ellie out to like a movie and Disney on Ice and like all of these amazing things to, make this part special for her, but also allow me space to not feel like I have to put on a happy face for her, because that was really hard. And I have friends to this day who still remember. And I think that's one of the biggest emotional pieces for moms who have either miscarried or have carried full term and have had to say goodbye to a baby at birth, is that we want them to be remembered. We want you to know what their name was. I have a girlfriend who's been a solid friend of mine since college, lives in California, and she remembers every year the day that I lost a baby. Every year, January 8th, she will text me and say, I remember today, and I'm just holding you and the baby, and I will never forget. And that just means so much. Like, wow. They actually had a life, and they did, it just wasn't as long as we hoped.
Right. Wow.
Yeah. So, and also, I mean, just to continue the to encourage other people, because this is not easy to talk about. We've kind of evidenced that, right? We've like cried 4 times in 20 minutes. But I just want to reassure everybody that it serves no one to minimize pain ever. Like, it doesn't serve anybody to not talk about it. And I completely respect, there are some people who are private and they don't want to come on Facebook Live and talk about it. No one is telling you to do that. Very few people are like us, and that's okay.
Yeah. In fact, when this topic came up, I even said to Jenny, like, are you comfortable sharing your story with everybody? Because, I didn't want to just assume. So
yeah, no, I just feel like it doesn't serve anybody to minimize how painful it still is.
And that was actually a question I wanted to ask you, Jenny.
Yeah.
As far as like the healing process, and I guess you kind of just answered that for me. You said that how painful it still is, because now it's been how many years since the last one?
It's been 10 years since the first one, and 5 since the last one.
5 since the last one. And so are there still things that like trigger those emotions? Do you feel like you're kind of it's fading at all? Like, how does that happen so many years later for you?
So, I mean, I think anybody who's been through anything, right, knows that grief is a process that is lifelong.
Yeah.
It just changes, right? And I think I had a different response to every miscarriage that I had thus far. The first one was completely devastating. I still think about it. I still grieve it. I think because it was so shocking that it wasn't anything that I had anticipated. And yeah, it was just one of those things. Like, I just felt it was a boy, and like, well, we have all girls. So there are like certain things about it.
Yeah.
And it's just interesting because the second one, I did not grieve in like a typical, I almost felt relieved. And people are also afraid to say that. It was at a very strange time. I had come to a place where I was like, Ellie's going to be the only kid, and I'm okay with that. Like, I don't want to really go through the whole trauma again. I'm all right with it. And we weren't really trying. And then I, became pregnant and lost it very quickly. And I feel like that's important for people to hear. Like, it's hard to say, but it's important for you to hear. I felt completely relieved, and I did not grieve it.
Wow.
I was glad that was not my story, because I didn't feel like I was emotionally capable, or at a time in my life where I would have been able to handle it. And then the third miscarriage was not shocking, because we at this point know how my body responds, and that we've got a 50-50 shot. But I think it was just heartbreaking. The first one was like shell shocked, and it took me a while to recover. But the third one really felt like, this is not going to happen for me. And so it was just devastating. Like, I had to not only mourn the loss of the baby that I wanted, but I really mourned like the end of giving birth. Like, I was no longer going to get a chance to be a mom again to someone else. Yeah.
So now with Cece, your youngest.
Yeah.
Did you have a change of heart and try, or like that was a surprise?
No. Yeah. That was definitely not, that was not planned. Cece was not planned. There's like no even medical explanation for Cece. Like, I didn't. But
you're using the old pull-out method, huh?
Listen, here's the trick.
Harry's here. I'm like, I don't even know how that happened.
I don't even know how she exists.
Yeah.
With all kind of like, I'm not a doctor, but I had a miscarriage and I didn't even have a cycle in between. And Cece is here, which actually feels like medically impossible. So I don't know. We're just going to call it a miracle, because that's what she is.
And she looks exactly like Rich. So
she looks exactly like my husband, 100%. Yep.
Definitely wasn't the Immaculate Conception.
No, she definitely belongs to him for sure. So yeah. I don't know. There's no explanation. She exists, and we would not be us without her.
Well, oh my gosh. Wow. So, I mean, this was a chock full of crazy emotional stuff to unpack. And I'm really thankful, Jenny, that you are generous enough to, be so vulnerable and share your story with all of us, with me, with all of us. And, because I know sometimes like reliving, yes, we want to talk about it, right? But also every time we talk about it, we also run the risk of reliving that pain all over again. So it's kind of like that, almost like bittersweet, right? The fact that,
100%. Absolutely. And yeah, I love you too. That's Betsy, my cousin. She's the best. I mean, I think as women, particularly because if we are moms, our social media feeds are full of other moms. And I'm sure I'm not the only one who has noticed this becoming more of an approachable topic that people are being more vocal about and sharing their experiences with. And so I think it's like I feel as though it's my moral obligation to meet you here and let you know, like, I see you. I have a list of all my friends who have lost babies at whatever while in the womb or outside into the earth. And I know all of their names, I promise. And I think of them regularly. And I just think women need to start talking about the fact that that's normal. It's normal to grieve a baby that you've lost, no matter what stage it has been. It's completely normal. It's also completely normal to not feel attached to it and feel like you can move on. Whatever way you grieve, however you approach this situation, this month particularly for miscarriage, infant loss, and infertility awareness, it's important for you to know that there are people that exist that have walked through what you have walked through, but you'll never know that unless you share your story.
100%. Jenny, thank you so much. I love you.
I love
Anyone out there that, wants to reach out to us, especially reach out to Jenny. She's here to talk to you, encourage you, answer questions. And we just love all you women that are tuning in with us. Thank you so much, everybody.
I know, this has been so amazing. This community is wonderful, and it was totally a safe place to share for me and for all of you. So we love you.
All right, guys. Happy Wednesday night. We'll see you next time on the She Interviews.